You told yourself this morning it would only take an hour, but here we are at night, the hour has swallowed your entire day, and that one simple thing still isn't finished. I need you to hear this before we go any further. That is not a character flaw. Your mind just lied to you about time. Psychologists call this specific lie the planning fallacy. It happens because of how our brains generate estimates. The moment you sit down to plan a task, you pull up an internal forecast, what researchers call the inside view. You run a little mental movie of the work ahead, and in that movie, the room is quiet, the files open perfectly, and you execute a flawless, frictionless run. But that inside view leaves out the actual texture of reality. It forgets the coworker who needs an urgent favor, the software that suddenly demands an update, or the simple fact that you might just lose your focus and stare at the wall for 20 minutes. The difference between imagining a task and physically doing that task is enormous. Because that gap is entirely invisible to us while we're planning, we end up calling our completely predictable delays a personal failing. If being constantly behind schedule were a matter of weak individual discipline, you would expect highly organized, heavily funded professionals to easily avoid the trap. In 1957, government planners and engineers in Australia estimated the Sydney Opera House would cost $7 million and open in 1963. It opened 10 years late, and the final bill was over $100 million, more than 14 times the original budget. We see the exact same mechanism operating in modern projects. The Berlin-Brandenburg Airport was fully funded and supposed to open in 2011. It sat unfinished until 2020, and the total cost ballooned from 2 billion to over 6 billion euros. A researcher named Bent Flyvbjerg spent years analyzing massive global projects exactly like these. This visualization plots his core finding. 9 out of every 10 enormous, highly scrutinized infrastructure projects run over budget. Think about the scale of that failure. If armies of the most experienced consultants alive cannot outthink this cognitive bug, your Tuesday to-do list doesn't stand a chance. The professionals are getting tripped up by the exact same flawed internal witness that tells you cleaning out the garage will only take an hour. When conscientious people realize they are bad at estimating time, they usually deploy a perfectly logical countermeasure. They try to plan harder. They map out the project, break everything into tiny, specific steps, and schedule each piece. But mapping out a project at this microscopic level actually weaponizes the planning fallacy against you. As you build this schedule, your brain strings together a highly vivid story, where step 1 smoothly flows right into step 2, and step 2 neatly connects to step 3. The sheer amount of detail makes the plan feel incredibly real. That vividness acts as a set of mental blinders, convincing you to trust the hypothetical sequence simply because you spent so much time carefully constructing it. The blinders cause you to leave out the friction, the sick kid, the software crash, the email chain that takes an hour to resolve. None of those completely standard, expected interruptions get a single dedicated line in your beautifully constructed schedule. Precision offers zero protection here. Making an estimate highly detailed just makes a hopelessly wrong number feel dangerously trustworthy. So what happens when a naturally organized person actively tries to be realistic? Let's look at a 1994 psychological study by Buehler, Griffin, and Ross. They observed graduate students writing their thesis. Let's call our avatar Maya. Maya is the exact opposite of lazy. She color-codes her calendar and sets 3 alarms. This chart compares the students' predictions against reality. When asked when they would finish, the students estimated about 34 days on average. In reality, they took 55. Without any malicious boss or bad luck involved, 7 out of 10 of these diligent students blew right past deadlines they had set for themselves. But the researchers added a brilliant twist. They went back to these exact same students and asked them to calculate their disaster number. They told them to estimate how long the thesis would take if absolutely everything that could go wrong actually went wrong. Even when these careful people deliberately sat down to imagine their worst possible nightmare scenario, they guessed an average of 49 days. Their absolute worst-case imagination was still vastly more optimistic than the 55 days reality actually required. The core defect here is the tool being used to measure time. Whether you are building a sunny, hopeful plan or a dark, pessimistic backup plan, you are still generating both numbers from the exact same broken instrument, your own imagination.
You cannot pessimism your way out of a bias that already infects your pessimism. As long as you keep consulting your imagination, you will continually miss your goals, slowly eroding the trust you have in your own promises. There is a very old solution to this problem buried in Stoic philosophy. The teacher Epictetus argued that all peace and effectiveness stem from understanding the difference between what is up to us and what is not. We have to accept that the future, and our imagination of the future, is entirely out of our control. But there is one thing that will never deceive you: the past. It is completely finished. It cannot be negotiated with. It cannot be argued out of existence. And you cannot wish it into a different shape. Psychologists have a practical application for this called the outside view. Operating from the outside view means strictly refusing to ask your gut how long a task will take. Instead, you interrogate the historical record of similar tasks you've already completed. You achieve accuracy and peace of mind when you stop consulting the flattering, optimistic voice in your head and start trusting the cold, reliable truth of your own history. Let's apply this to a regular workday. The next time you have a quarterly report due, don't ask yourself how quickly you can get it done. Open your calendar and look at the last 4 reports you submitted. Find exactly how long they actually took to complete, including all the rewrites, the lost files, and the friction. Embracing that true historical number often feels uncomfortably long at first. But planning around that larger number immediately eliminates the daily, private humiliation of constantly falling behind a fantasy schedule you invented for yourself. So tonight, try this with just one thing. Take the next task you're dreading, write down your very first gut instinct on how long it will take, and then cross it out. Overwrite it with the actual historical time it took you to complete it the last time you did it. Keeping an accurate promise to your calendar restores the weight of your own word. Every time the clock proves you right, you peel back the layers of self-blame to find the discipline that was there all along, just waiting for an honest map. True discipline is not grinding harder to make a fantasy come true. It is having the unglamorous strength to build your life on the solid ground of reality.